Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is how to boost your reading speed. My name is Paul Novak. I'm the founder and program director here at Iris Reading, and I want to thank you all for attending. This is actually one of the biggest webinars. We had I think 2,000 some people that registered for the webinar. So I want to thank you all for attending and showing your support. I want to make this as useful as possible to you. I know if you're probably attending this webinar, you probably do a lot of reading either for school or maybe personal reading, and I want to help you speed that up. Just a little bit about Iris. What we focus on is helping people read faster, but we also try to focus on comprehension. So for those of you that maybe when you registered for this webinar, you probably saw a link to register for another webinar that focused on comprehension. In this webinar, we're going to focus mainly on improving your reading speed. We'll talk a little bit about comprehension towards the end, but if you're looking for something that goes into more depth on comprehension, that's in another webinar. But let's talk. First of all, I want you to think about when was the last time you actually learned how to read. And for most people, the last time they learned how to read was the first time they learned how to read. It was maybe in grade school when they were in first or second grade or kindergarten. And for most people, what happens is the last time they learned how to read, what kind of reading were you doing? It was mainly very simple material, and unfortunately, a lot of people aren't taught um, more advanced ways to read. So I don't want you to think of this program as a hooked on phonics. It's definitely not that. All of you probably already read well, and we're just trying to get you to speed up so we can get through more material in less time. Now, a few quick things about this webinar. There are a couple articles that would be useful for you to access, and you don't have to print them out. You could view them just on the screen if you like. Um, One article is irisreading.com/article-1.pdf. You should see that on the screen right here. The reason we're going to use the articles is because we want to measure your reading speed, and we'll do a few exercises today as well. Now, let's say you're having trouble accessing the article for whatever reason. Maybe you're having trouble with PDFs, or maybe the link is just not working for you. It should be working. When I type the link in, I see this is the article we're going to do initially. Don't start reading it yet because I want to make sure we can measure your reading speed all at the same time. But again, you could either print this out if you want, or you can just view it on the screen. And a third option, if you can't access the article for whatever reason, if you happen to have any other kind of reading material near you, maybe a book, a magazine article, or a newspaper, you can use that as well for when we measure your reading speed. So that's going to be one of the first things we do today. How fast do you currently read? And some people know this, some people don't. It's not something a lot of people add to their resume. For example, you might put your typing speed on your resume, but a lot of people don't add their reading speed, even though might be a useful and very unique skill to add to a resume. I want to find out how fast you're currently reading. So we're going to test it out using article number 1. Now that's the article you see on your screen at the bottom. Again, irisreading.com/article-1.pdf. We're going to use that to measure our reading speed. Now, again, if you can't access that article for whatever reason and you want to use some other material that you have nearby, maybe a textbook, a novel you're reading, or maybe a magazine or newspaper, that's fine too. I'll explain how you can calculate your reading speed. But either way, just make sure you have some sort of reading in front of you right now. So the way I'm going to test out your reading speed, we're going to start with just 1 minute of reading. I don't want you to try and go faster than you normally would, and I also don't want you to go slower than you normally would. Read for good comprehension the way you would read this at any other point, so we can get an accurate idea of how fast you're reading. So we're going to read for 1 minute. I'm setting my timer right now at 1 minute, and make sure you have your material in front of you right now, and go ahead and begin reading. Okay, go ahead and draw a line wherever you stopped. Or if you don't want to draw a line where you stopped, what I want you to basically do is count the number of lines that you read during that minute of reading. So count them up. Count how many lines you read. Write that number off to the side somewhere. Now, if you were reading the material, the article that we talked about, let's say you stopped right here. This material is actually very specifically formatted for about 10 words per line. That's the average number of words per line in this material. So a quick way to find out approximately how fast you read would be to count every single, let's say you ended right here, count all the lines you read and multiply by 10. However, you see lines like this where there's only 2 words at the end of the paragraph. You don't have to count that as a line, but if the line is almost full, feel free to count it as a line or approximate it. Now, if you wanted to be extremely precise, you would count every single word you read during that minute, and that would be a words per minute. But for right now, if you want to just get a quick idea, count the number of lines you read, multiply by 10. Now, for those of you, let's say you weren't reading this material here. Let's say you were reading some other material, a magazine or a book that you have in front of you. You want to do the same thing, but you're multiplying by the average number of words per line. Or again, you can count up all the words that you read. Now, the reason why I'm asking you not to count all the words you read, we're going to continue moving forward in the presentation, counting every single word right now. Might take a little bit too long. We're going to proceed because usually the next question that I get from a lot of people is, well, how fast is the average person reading? The average person reads 150 to 250 words a minute. So I'll just write that in here so you have an idea. 150 to 250, that's the average reading speed. So if you're wondering what it was, that's what it is. 150 to 250. Now, if you're above 250, that means above average. Below 150 is below average. But I also want you to know this average reading speed is based on medium level material. So this material right here would be considered medium level material. All that means is it's not too easy and it's not too hard. It kind of falls somewhere in the middle. I think all of us would agree this material here is not advanced level physics. If we were reading advanced level physics or anything else more technical than this, what would happen to your reading speed? It would probably drop. And that's okay. That's normal for every reader. You're going to read the more technical material more slowly, and the easier stuff you're going to read faster. So this is the average reading speed for medium level material. Keep that in mind. Now, one other interesting thing to keep in mind is the average reading speed used to be a little faster. It used to be 250 to 350 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, people were reading a little faster. Now, why is this? A lot of people ask me, well, why is the average reading speed dropped? I think part of it has to do with the fact that more things are competing for our attention now when we're reading. What I mean by that is if you were a college student 30 years ago and you were trying to study for your class, you're reading your textbook, chances are your phone is not going to go off in the middle of your chapter, or you're not going to get a text message because you don't own a phone 30 years ago. So that's one type of potential distraction while you're reading. Now, other types of potential distractions, we know what they are. You might be reading your textbook, but you've got your laptop in front of you, and you might have the urge to check Facebook or your email or whatever other types of potential distractions are out there. So I think the average reading speed has dropped off because it reflects the shorter attention span that now is just kind of inherent when we have all these things competing for our attention. Now, what that also means is it's very important to learn how to improve our focus. How do we improve our concentration so we don't go back as much? You ever have that situation where you read a whole page of text and then you look up like I have no clue what I just read? All of us have had that situation happen to us where we have to reread the material. So we're going to talk about some simple ways that we can improve our concentration while we're reading. Because if you improve your concentration, what's going to happen to your reading speed? It's probably going to go a little higher. And if you improve your concentration, what about your comprehension? You'll probably have better comprehension as well. I want to start by talking about a few old reading habits. Remember we said the last time we learned how to read was a while ago. Maybe it was the first time we learned how to read. And since then we've been doing certain kinds of reading habits, and if we want to read faster, we've got to change some of these habits. The first habit that we're going to talk about, and there's actually 3 of them. The first habit is called fixation. Fixation is something that your eyes do. When you're reading, most people tend to fixate on a word by word basis with their eyes. So in other words, you're reading each and every single word as you're going along the page. You're not picking and choosing which words you're going to read and not read. You're reading every word. Now, nothing's wrong with reading every word. I mean, we want to understand the material well, and we don't want to skip over small words because we know small words could potentially change the meaning of a sentence. So I want you to think about this habit of fixation. Instead of going word by word, you're fully capable of reading groups of words. Now, when I say groups of words, some people say, well, how do I do that? You actually do this all the time in other parts of your life. You read groups of words all the time when you're driving. If you were driving towards, let's say, New York City, and you saw a sign that said New York City, 3 words, you wouldn't fixate on each and every single one of those words. You would fixate on a sign and read those 3 words no problem. The funny thing is, if the words New York City were on a printed page, most people would read each and every single one of them by fixating with their eyes on each and every single one. Now, you could make one fixation and get all 3, but most people don't read that way. So we'll talk about how to read groups of words in this webinar. We'll also talk about how to reduce regression. This is the second old reading habit we really need to make an improvement on and change it. Regression in the context of reading just means going back and rereading material. We've all done this before. And I want to go over, because one way to reduce it is to improve our concentration, but another way to reduce it is to avoid going back when we don't have to go back. Here's what I mean by this. Sometimes we read a sentence, and I'm sure you've had this happen to you at some point in the past. You read a sentence and you didn't understand it, so you reread the sentence. You ever have that situation where you reread the same sentence over maybe 6, 7, 8 times, and for some reason it's just not making sense or it's not sticking? This would be an example of a pointless regression. In other words, you're going back when you don't have to go back. What I want to argue here is that there's no reason to go back after reading just one sentence, and here's why. Let's think of the possibilities. Let's say you read one sentence and you didn't understand it. Isn't it true that maybe that sentence wasn't written clearly? That's possible. It's also possible maybe I wasn't focused, but think about this possibility, and this happens all the time. Isn't it true that that sentence that you just read doesn't make any sense until you read the next sentence or the rest of the paragraph? I want you to keep that in mind because this happens in reading all the time where you have to read one sentence and then it doesn't make complete sense until you finish up the paragraph, you finish up the idea. Paragraphs on their own are just ideas with some details that follow. So try to avoid rereading after just one sentence because sometimes that next sentence will help you understand it better. Now, when is it a good time to go back and reread material? You want to go back and reread. If you finish a whole paragraph and you aren't sure what was covered in that paragraph, then you should probably go back and reread, but don't do it after one sentence. A lot of people do it after one sentence. Now, let's talk about the third old reading habit. The name of this habit, it's called subvocalization. Now, what does this mean? This is the habit of saying words in your head. We all remember when we were first learning how to read, we had to read out loud. The teacher would ask us to get up in front of class and we had to read out loud. I used to hate reading out loud because English isn't my first language. It's actually Polish. Both of my parents are Polish. I didn't speak any English until I got into school at the kindergarten level. I was taking ESL classes, so I really hated reading out loud because I would mess up on words constantly. Now, the good news is you don't have to read out loud forever. Eventually, what does your teacher tell you to do? Your teacher would tell you, say the word silently in your head. And the name of this habit, it's known as subvocalization, the habit of just saying words in your head. So I want you to think about how many of you hear voices in your head while you're reading. And it doesn't mean you're crazy. It just means that, that's how most people read. We say the words silently in our head. And it's called subvocalization. The reason why we have to change this, I want you to think about it this way. If you're saying every single word in your head, doesn't that mean you'll only read as fast as you talk? And if you think about it, this is true for a lot of people. If you're saying every word in your head, that means you're limiting your reading speed to your talking speed. And what you can do, and if you want to test this out on your own, you can try it. Try testing out how fast you talk. You can read out loud for a minute and see how fast you talk. And a lot of people will find that their talking speed is very similar to their reading speed. We're not going to do it now, but if you wanted to try it out for yourself, you can. Now, let's say your reading speed is faster than your talking speed. That means you're probably not saying every word in your head. Essentially, what happens is if we were to measure a group of 100 people, their talking speed, what we would find is the average would fall into this range, 150 to 250. Now, earlier I mentioned that was the average reading speed. Well, it just so happens, and it's no coincidence, that the average talking speed is exactly the same. Why? Because of this habit right here. When you're saying every word in your head, that means you'll read as fast as you talk. So that's exactly why we want to change this habit. We want to get out of the habit of saying every word in our head and into the habit of reading as fast as we can think. And I think all of us would agree our thinking speed is a lot faster than our talking speed. So let's move on here. And I want to discuss how we can start changing these habits. How do you get better at anything? You've got to practice. And practicing is extremely important. It requires repetition, and we've practiced all sorts of things throughout our lives. I want to talk about how we can practice our reading. And I know some people think that the way you practice reading is by just reading books. And that's not the best way to practice your reading. When I say practice, I mean getting better at key areas of reading. And the key areas of reading, I would boil them down into three big areas. There's speed, comprehension, and retention. So speed, we want to read faster. Comprehension, we want to understand what we're reading. And retention, we want to remember what we read. What I'm going to do in this webinar is I'm going to take you through a very basic speed reading drill. And we're going to do this right now. This speed drill, let me explain how it works. There are actually a couple requirements for this drill. First requirement is you have to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. So if you have some printed material in front of you, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the same material we already just read. So remember this article over here? Let's say you finished reading and you got up to this line down here. What I want you to do is I want you to be using your hand as a guide going from left to right, line by line through this material. And you're going to be doing this with your hand or a pen. Now, if you have this material, if it's not printed out and it's just on your screen, you can use your hand on your screen, or if you don't feel comfortable using your hand on the screen, you don't have to do it during this drill. But if you have the material printed out, I definitely want you to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. I understand that it's maybe not that practical if you have this on your screen right now to use your hand, or if you have a touch screen, that's not really going to work well because you're going to move around the screen. But there's a reason why it's important to use your hand or pen to guide your eyes. And it has to do with the way that your eyes work. When something is moving around, your eyes will naturally focus on whatever is moving around. So I want you to move your hand from left to right or a pen and just guide your eyes. Your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. Now, the other reason I want you to use your hand to guide your eyes, if you think about it, if I asked you to count how many lines are on this page, what would you do? You'd probably, either use your mouse or you'd probably use your finger to count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'd count them up like that because when you point to something, it's easier for your eyes to focus on that material. So I want you to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes if you have the material printed out. And if you want, you can do it on the screen if you don't have it printed out. What we're going to do, the second thing during the speed drill is I want you to go faster than you would normally read. Keep in mind, this speed drill is a form of practice. I don't want you to associate it to regular reading. With regular reading, we want to read and comprehend as much as we possibly can. With the speed drill that we're about to do, I want you to purposely go a lot faster than you would normally read, even if that means your comprehension is not that great. Now, what is that? How are we going to do this speed drill? I want to explain exactly how we're going to do. The first few drills are going to be very quick, very simple. You're going to go back to the material that we read earlier. Remember that line that you read up to? Let's say it was right here. I want you to start back at the beginning, and you have to read through all of this material and get up to that line in the amount of time that I give you. For the first drill that we do, I'm going to set my timer for 40 seconds, and you'll hear it go off when the time's up. But you've got 40 seconds to make it through all the way. Let's say you got to the end of this paragraph earlier. I want you to go through all this material in 40 seconds. Now, after we do our first drill, we're going to cut the time down a little bit. I'm going to ask you to go through all that material in a little bit less time. This time I'll ask you to get through it in 35 seconds. And then the next drill, we'll do it in 30 seconds. And the whole point is I want you to just get used to seeing words at a faster pace. And of course, I also want you to make sure that you're using your hand or a pen to guide your eyes, if it's practical to do so. Again, I mentioned earlier, it might not be practical if you haven't printed this out. Maybe you don't want to use your hand on the page. But I do want you to go faster. You have to go faster than you read earlier. And you know what? It shouldn't be that hard because if you already read this material earlier in 1 minute, I want you to get through the same material in 40 seconds. Now, for those of you that are just joining us, let's say you joined this webinar a little later and you didn't measure your reading speed earlier. If you have this material in front of you, I simply want you to get all the way up to the end of this fourth paragraph here, right over here. And I'm only going to give you 40 seconds to get there. Now, the rest of you, if you measured your reading speed at the beginning, let's say you got up to here, or maybe you got down here, you got to get through that same material in 40 seconds. So we're going to start our first drill. You've got 40 seconds to make it to the line that you read up to. Now, if you make it to that line, feel free to go past it. You've got 40 seconds to get through all of that material. Ready, set, and go. All right, stop and look at the line where you stopped. Hopefully you made it up to your line. If you made it there, very good. We're going to cut the time down now to 35 seconds. And I want you to do the same thing. You're going to get through the same material, the line that you originally read up to, but a little bit less time. I'm only going to give you 35 seconds now to get to that line. So let's do our next drill. And again, the whole point of this is that you're purposely going faster than you would normally read. And I also want you to make sure, if you can, use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes from left to right, line by line, as you're going through this material. And it's key that you go faster than you would normally read. You've got now 35 seconds to make it to the line you originally read up to. Ready, set, and go. And stop. Okay, if you made it there, great. We're going to cut it now to 30 seconds. So I'm asking you to get through the same material in half the time. So you only have 30 seconds to get there. Same rule applies. I just want you to purposely go faster than you would normally read. A lot of times at this point, people ask me, well, what if my comprehension isn't that great? That's okay when we're doing these speed drills. The key here is to get used to seeing words faster than you would normally read them. So you can think of this initially as kind of like a hand-eye coordination exercise. That's how I want you to think of it. And if you are getting comprehension, part of it has to do with the fact that you're just going over the same material that you already read. And that's fine. Our main goal here is hand-eye coordination and getting used to seeing words faster. So let's try to go faster again. You got to make it to that same line, the line you originally read to, in 30 seconds. Ready, set, and go. A little faster. And stop. Okay, if you made it there, great. What we're going to do now, instead of going over the same material in less and less time, I actually want to give you more material to cover. And what I want you to do now is you got to get through the entire article. So this is a 2-page article here. I want you to get through the entire article in less time. When I say less time, I don't mean less than 30 seconds. I'm going to give you more time, don't worry. I'm going to give you a very generous 3 minutes and 30 seconds on the timer. Now, I know that's not enough time to read it for perfect comprehension. What I want you to focus on is speeding through all this material at a rate that is much faster than you would normally read. Even if that means your comprehension is pretty terrible, that's okay when we're doing the speed drills. Right now, we just want to focus on seeing the words faster. So you're going to start at the beginning of the article. I still want you to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. And you've got to get through all of this material. So from beginning all the way through onto the next page. And by the way, let's say, remember earlier I asked you to read to a certain line. Let's say you got up to here. You're going to be getting into a lot of new material here that you haven't read. I want you to go at the same speed, which is a faster speed than you normally read, through all of this material. Your main goal in this exercise is to complete the article in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, I will try to give you a halfway. I'll give you a halfway point. When we get halfway through the 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you'll hear me say halfway. And that means you should probably be about halfway through the article, somewhere on this other side. If you're not yet halfway, when I say halfway, try to speed up a little bit. I know that your comprehension is going to be affected. That's okay right now because I'm purposely asking you to go faster than you would normally read. We'll get to comprehension in a little bit. So start back at the beginning of the article. You've got to get through the whole thing. And by the way, if you make it through the whole thing before time is up, just go back to the beginning and keep on practicing till time is up. So, in other words, keep going from left to right, line by line. Keep going through the material until the 3 minutes and 30 seconds is up. All right, we're going to start the drill. 3 minutes and 30 seconds to complete the entire article. Ready, set, and go. Halfway. Okay, stop. Go ahead and hopefully you made it through the article. We're going to do this again. We're going to do a few more drills like this, and then we'll change things up. We'll go back to reading, but I want to do a few more drills where we're going faster. You got to do the same thing. I'm going to give you a little bit less time. You've got to get through the entire article in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So 3 minutes and 15 seconds. purposely go a lot faster than you would normally read. I know this last time that we just did this drill, you probably felt like your comprehension wasn't that great. Now, most of your comprehension may have come from this first few paragraphs that we originally read. The rest of it, it was probably essentially, I'm asking you to skim through all of this material. I want you to skim through all this material and get through it in 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Here's the logic behind this approach, because some people think it's counterintuitive to why are we going so fast and not understanding anything? I want to be able to read with comprehension. This is a form of practice. And before we start reading faster with comprehension, we want to start by getting used to seeing the words faster. Once we get used to seeing words quickly, then we could say, all right, I'm used to seeing the words very quickly. How do I actually get some comprehension now at this kind of a really quick rate? But we can't do it all at once, so we're just starting off getting used to seeing the words faster. We'll talk about comprehension in a little bit. 3 minutes and 15 seconds to get through the entire article. Ready, set, and go. Halfway. Okay, and stop. And that was 3 minutes and 15 seconds. If you made it through the article, great. We're going to do one more drill like this, and you've got 3 minutes flat to get through the entire article. And again, I just want to reemphasize that we're purposely going a lot faster than we would normally read. You can compare this to how you would practice anything else. For example, I grew up playing basketball, and the way that you would practice basketball, you would focus also on three big areas. We would focus on offense, defense, and strength and conditioning. But when you were practicing, you weren't working on all three areas. You couldn't. For example, I wouldn't work on my jump shot, an offensive skill, while also trying to lift weights, a strength and conditioning exercise. You focus on one thing at a time and then you bring it all together in a game. Now, with reading, it's the same. Our approach is the same way. Before we start, we can't just work on speed, comprehension, and retention. We have those three big areas that we need to improve: speed, comprehension, retention. Right now, we're just focusing on speed. Later on, we can try to focus on comprehension. But initially, you focus on speed. Once we get used to seeing words faster, then we start working on comprehension. So I want you to do one last drill here. You've got 3 minutes to get through the entire article. And the whole goal here is just purposely go a lot faster than you would normally read, even if that means you're sacrificing a lot of comprehension. One last drill. 3 minutes. Ready, set, and go. Should be about halfway. Okay, stop. And if you made it through the entire article, great. What we're going to do now, we did about maybe a little over 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, almost 15 minutes of practice drills. We're going to switch it up now, and we're going to go back to regular reading. So this whole time we were doing speed drills. What I want you to do now is go back to regular reading. When I say regular reading, I mean with comprehension. At this point, we need to refer to article number 2. Now, that's at the link that you see on your screen right now, irisreading.com/article-2.pdf. Go ahead and refer to that link. And if you already have it printed out, just put the article in front of you. If you don't have it printed out, go into another tab and you can just maybe read it on the screen. And I'll also have this pulled up on the screen for all of you. You'll see it right here. What I want you to do at this point is go back to regular reading. Read for good comprehension. I don't want you to go purposely a lot faster than you would normally read. I actually want you to slow it down now. I want you to read for good comprehension. The only thing I want you to do differently, however, from before, is I want you to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. And go at whatever speed feels comfortable so you can actually comprehend and understand what you're reading. So we're going to read for 1 minute. And again, I want you to slow it down. Don't go too slow. Don't go too fast. Read for good comprehension, and make sure you're using your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. Okay, everyone's ready, set, and go. Okay, go ahead and stop. Look at the line where you stopped, and I want you to calculate your speed again. So count the number of lines you read. This material also is formatted for about 10 words per line. Or if you were doing this on your own material, you would count how many words do I have on average per line. If you have 10 words per line or 11 words per line, in this material there's 10 words per line. I want you to take the number of lines you read and multiply that number by 10. Again, count the number of lines you read and multiply it by 10. I'll give you a moment to do that. And most people at this point find themselves reading a little faster after this first set of drills. When you drill people for 10 to 15 minutes, a lot of times they make their first improvement. If you made an improvement, very good. We can definitely build on this improvement, but I want you to get a few takeaways from the drills that we just did. Takeaway number 1. Going forward, I want you, whenever you have printed material, I want you to use your hand or a pen to guide your eyes. Why? Because your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. And using a pen or your hand to guide your eyes when you're reading in printed material is the easiest way you can improve your focus. And if you have better focus while you're reading, better concentration, you're going to have probably, you might be able to read a little faster, you might be able to get better comprehension. Using your hand is tremendously helpful. Now, I understand that using your hand is not practical all the time, because if you're reading on the computer screen, not many people want to be dragging their finger across the computer screen. So I'll talk about that in a moment, how to read faster on the computer screen. But I want you to continue, when you do have the printed material, whether it's a magazine or a book that you're reading or a textbook, use your hand as a guide or a pen. Now, let's talk about how the speed drill works, because we're doing speed drills for 10 to 15 minutes. And when we're doing these drills, what happens is people get used to going at a faster rate. If you get used to seeing words very, very quickly, it's kind of like when you're driving a car on a highway. If you're going on the highway at an elevated speed, let's say you're going 70 miles an hour on the highway, eventually you have to get off the highway. Think about how it feels when you get off the highway. It probably feels a little slow. For most people, it feels very slow, and sometimes you're still going 40 or 50 miles an hour and you don't realize it. Why does it feel so slow? Because you got used to going a lot faster. When you get used to going a lot faster, when you drop your speed down, it doesn't feel as fast. The same thing happens with reading. If you get used to doing these speed drills where you're going maybe 2 or 3 times faster than you would normally be reading, you might have horrible comprehension during the drills, but when you drop it back down, if you're practicing at 7 or 800 words a minute, and you drop it down to maybe 3 or 400, it's not going to feel as fast. And then we start working on comprehension. As I mentioned, we have another webinar based on comprehension. We actually have an entire course that focuses on comprehension, but you got to take these things one step at a time. If you made an improvement, very good, because a little bit of practice sometimes goes a long way. Now, let's talk about reading faster on the computer screen, because reading faster on the computer screen, let's say you had this material and you were reading it on the screen, you don't want to use your hand because you don't want to smear up your screen. I want to show you guys now. Let's take an example article here from The Onion. So let's say we have to read this very, very technical reading here. We know the problems of reading on the screen. Well, there's distractions everywhere. There's the ad up here, the ad over there. There's even distractions from the side here when we look at these other snippets of articles. So what I want to show you is how to read this article a little faster, which is World Scientists Admit They Just Don't Like Mice. We're going to use an application that we developed called Accelerator. Here's what it looks like. This is Accelerator. You just paste whatever text you want to read in this box right here. So I'm going to do that right now in the article. We're going to take the material that we want to read here. Simply going to highlight all this material. And then we're going to copy that material. And we're going to paste it into the application. So we just hit paste. And then we click the read button. Now in the settings, I want you to focus on a few important things here in the settings. There's a words per minute setting. This is how fast you want to go. By default, it sets it to 300 words a minute. The chunk size, this is how many words do you want to see at a time. It's set at 2. What I want you to do right now is try to focus on the middle of the screen here. You're going to notice the words are going to blink on the screen at the speed that we set, specifically 300 words a minute. Now, because this is being done online, and I don't know if there's going to be a little connection issue, you may or may not see this at exactly 300 words a minute, but when you use it on your own, it will always be at 300 words a minute because your connection is your connection. Because we're streaming this online through a shared screen, it might be a little different. But this is 300 words a minute. Let's try to read this article. World Scientists Admit They Just Don't Like Mice. Let's see if you could read it at 300 words a minute. All we got to do is hit play, and it's going to start blinking. Here we go. All right, let me stop it there. You guys get the idea here. So this was going 300 words a minute, and notice how it was blinking 2 words at a time until we get to the end of a sentence. There's actually a very, there's an advanced setting here. What you can do, if you click on advanced down here, there's a checkbox right here that we had enabled, which says start new chunk at the end of sentences and paragraphs. So remember earlier we said show me 2 words at a time. Well, when it gets to the end of a sentence, it'll only show you the last word instead of showing you the last word and then the first word of the next one. That would actually interfere with your comprehension. So you want to make sure you have this checked off. There's a number of other advanced settings. For example, speed variability, slow down for large chunks of text and speed up when there's smaller chunks. So the average words per minute stays the same. This right here will slow down when you have that really, really big paragraph, and it's going to speed up through the shorter ones. This you want to enable if you're reading a lot of fiction online. That will help you get through that because fiction has these long paragraphs, and sometimes you have the very short ones, which are dialogue, where those dialogue have a lot of repetition. For example, blah, blah, blah said this character. Blah, blah, blah replied that character. And you have this back and forth, which is sometimes kind of repetitive. That'll help you to get through that material. Now there's another setting right here called slight pause at the end of sentences and paragraphs. You might find that useful if it's blinking the words on the screen. This will give you a little pause here. It's almost like a little rest pause. It's going to be a very subtle pause though, and that actually helps you with comprehension. And also this right here is an interesting setting that you can enable. Skip over stop words, which convey no additional meaning to the sentence. So words like the, and. It'll give you a default list right here, but you can add whatever you want. And these are just some advanced settings that you can play around with. If you do a lot of reading on the computer screen, I think you'll find this application to be very much worth your time. It's a very useful application for reading faster on the computer screen, so check it out when you get a chance. And I also want to emphasize that some of the other courses we provide, if you're interested in taking one of our longer courses, we have a comprehension course, we have a course on speed reading, a speed reading mastery course. We actually have a special on the website right now, which expires towards the end of this week. It's for 75% off all our online courses. So essentially, you're paying $49.99 instead of the $200 price. If you're interested in that, go to irisreading.com and click on online courses to look at those. Or if you want to organize a live workshop at your company or school, you can contact us at support@irisreading.com. Or if you like, you can also contact me. My information's on the screen right now. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. I really hope you found it helpful. For all of you, will be getting a follow-up email in a few hours, which is going to give you, for those of you that registered, it will give you a recording to this webinar if you want to share it with your friends. It'll also give you a link to Accelerator and other useful applications. Thank you again so much for attending the webinar. I hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, feel free to get in touch. And thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.